Mongolia has a territory of 1.56 million square kilometers, but only 3.5 million people. The corresponding Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region of China has an area of 1.18 million square kilometers and a population of 24 million, of which the Mongolian population exceeds 4 million, more than Outer Mongolia. The Mongolians in China are the orthodox descendants of the Golden family, that is, the descendants of Genghis Khan. Therefore, who will inherit the mantle of Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongolian Empire, has always been a thorn in the hearts of the Mongolians. In 1921, Outer Mongolia became independent under the instigation of the Soviet Union, but the Chinese government has always refused to recognize it. In 1946, the government of the Republic of China recognized the independence of Outer Mongolia, but later, because the Soviet Union intervened in the Chinese Civil War, the national government canceled the agreement to recognize the independence of Outer Mongolia. However, after the founding of People's Republic of China in 1949, the independence of Outer Mongolia was recognized by the Chinese government as a fait accompli. Today, the Mongolians in Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia have their own development. The Mongolians in China have always used traditional Uyghur Mongolian as the writing standard, while Outer Mongolia uses Cyrillic letters for spelling. Although Outer Mongolia has recently been promoting the restoration of traditional Mongolian, the long-term influence of the Soviet Union and Russia on Outer Mongolia still leaves a heavy Slavic trace in its culture. In the Qing dynasty, Inner Mongolia was an aristocratic family that married into the Manchu royal family and was a core component of the ruling class. During the Republic of China, Mongolia was also one of the 5 core ethnic groups. After the founding of the Communist Party of China, the ethnic equality policy was implemented, and the Mongolians have always received preferential treatment. After the reform and opening up, Inner Mongolia's economy developed rapidly, relying on rich mineral resources, tourism resources, and animal husbandry to quickly become rich. Inner Mongolia's per capita GDP exceeds $13,000, more than twice that of Outer Mongolia. Among them, Ordos City's per capita GDP is as high as $36,000, exceeding that of coastal cities. The Mongolians, who own land and pastures, are much richer than the local Han people. Therefore, they have a high degree of identification with China and do not have much affection for their Outer Mongolian relatives. There are some Greater Mongolians in China who hope that all Mongolians live in a unified country, but the proportion is very low. Of course, there are also many Mongolians who hope that China will unify Outer Mongolia. However, most Mongolians in Inner Mongolia have always believed that they are the orthodox of the Golden family, and Outer Mongolia is just a branch, and has no right to compete for the dominance of Mongolian culture. They are even too lazy to debate with the Outer Mongolians, because Outer Mongolia is a place polluted by Russian culture, and Slavic culture has nothing to do with Mongolian history. Mongolia has always had close relations with the Central Plains dynasty in history and belongs to the same cultural circle. As for the Han people living in Inner Mongolia, they have lived together with the local Mongolians for a long time, and there are many intermarriages, so there is no gap. They used to have some imagination about Outer Mongolia, but they heard that Outer Mongolia was more hostile to China, then they lost interest. Some unificationists in China, whether Han or other ethnic groups, want to unify Outer Mongolia, but most people are not interested in this. Reclaiming the 1.56 million square kilometers of desert in the north does not seem to mean much to China, and it will also make Russia feel terrified, which is completely unnecessary. As for the Outer Mongolians' hatred of China, the Chinese do not quite understand it. It was the Manchus who conquered them and incorporated them into China. The Manchus are now also one of the ethnic minorities, and they have no intention of Outer Mongolia. The Central Plains dynasty defeated the nomadic peoples of the Mongolian plateau many times in history, but never thought of ruling there. The Chinese are really not interested in them, so why do they hate China? Moreover, as a country that can only communicate with the outside world through Russia and China, isn't it courting death to do so? So the Chinese hope that the government will block Outer Mongolia, so that they can't communicate with the outside world, teach them a lesson, and let them recognize their status. Outer Mongolia regards the United States as a so-called third neighbor, which is an insult to China and Russia. China and Russia should join forces to cut off Outer Mongolia's air and land channels to make them obey. Otherwise, it is ridiculous for them to use Chinese ports to export minerals while threatening the security of China and Russia. If the Americans are willing to transport Mongolia's minerals from space, China and Russia have no objection and will send them blessings. The above is the netizens' views on Outer Mongolia, which are relatively objective. From my personal point of view, I would like to say a few words to my friends in Outer Mongolia. Develop the economy well, and don't think too much. China does not want to annex Outer Mongolia. If it really wants to, you can't resist it. To put it bluntly, if we really annex you, we will have to give you money and support your economic development, which may not be a bad thing for you. Don't always think of yourself as the center of the universe. If China really wants to blockade you, you can only blow the northwest wind on the plateau. Can't we ET along well and make money together? Build good relations with China, let Russia's oil and gas pipelines pass through your land to China, and then collect some tolls to live a decent life. Isn't that good?